Hello, my name's Teagan, and 3 days ago I came home for Christmas for the first time in 3 years. I brought gifts, booked a first-class flight, tried to show them I'd finally made it. But when I walked through the door, my father didn't say welcome back. He pointed at me and said, "You shouldn't be here." My sister smiled and called me a parasite in front of everyone, and then I picked up the phone. They didn't know what I'd been paying for. They didn't know I kept the lights on in this house. They didn't know. The house wasn't even theirs anymore. So what exactly did they see when I showed them everything? Would you stay if your own family erased you like you were never there? The rental car's engine barely clicked off before I sat there, hands frozen on the steering wheel, just staring at the house. Same blue shutters, same sagging porch swing. From the outside, it looked like a postcard version of home. The kind people buy in gift shops, framed in glass to keep the memories looking warmer than they actually were. But inside that house, I wasn't sure there'd be a seat left for me. I stepped out, smoothing the front of my navy coat, the one I bought just for this visit. My boots crunched against the gravel, and the cold mountain air bit my cheeks, sharper than I remembered. Asheville hadn't changed much, but I had. 3 years away in Chicago taught me to walk fast, speak sharper, carry less expectation. I opened the back door and pulled out the bags, one carry-on and a second smaller bag filled with neatly wrapped gifts. I'd spent hours choosing each one. Thoughtful, practical, personal, naive, maybe. I was banking on the idea that generosity might soften old tension, or at least make them see me. The front door still had the same red wreath Mom used to hang every December. A little lopsided now. I fixed it gently before ringing the bell. Footsteps. The lock clicked. Raymond, I stopped calling him Dad in my head a long time ago, opened the door. He didn't smile, didn't blink. He looked at me like he'd just found a stray dog at his doorstep. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly. "This isn't a good time." I held the gifts tighter against my chest. "It's Christmas." He looked behind him, as if debating whether to let me in or just close the door. Finally, he stepped aside. I stepped through the threshold slowly, almost like I was breaking into my own past. Laughter echoed from the living room, high-pitched, familiar, and unmistakable. Callista. Of course. Her voice had the same syrupy sweetness as always, just loud enough for everyone to know she was the sun around which this house orbited. The scent of cinnamon potpourri punched me in the face. Callista always overdid it with the holiday smells, like masking something rotten beneath. I turned into the hallway and froze. She was there, drink in hand, draped in a velvet red wrap, chatting with two neighbors I didn't recognize and her teenage daughter. She looked up, locked eyes with me, and I could see it, the moment she decided to strike. "Well, well," she sang, loud enough to turn heads. "3 years later, and you come back just in time for dessert." Laughter. Stiff, confused, polite, then she smirked wider. "Or maybe rent's due and you're looking for a new host?" The neighbors looked at me, half pitying, half curious. I didn't respond. I blinked twice, shifted the gifts in my arms, and walked past her. The air felt thicker with every step. I set the presents carefully on the entry table, next to a ceramic angel that had belonged to Mom. Raymond stayed silent, hovering near the doorway like a security guard. Callista turned back to her audience, delighted. I caught Malis, my younger cousin, leaning quietly against the staircase. She gave me a tiny wave, her eyes soft. I gave her a nod. She was the only one who hadn't turned cold. The rest of the room kept moving as if I were just another shadow. No greetings, no hugs, just a hush followed by more laughter, as if I hadn't just crossed state lines and emotional minefields to be here. I stood still, hands now empty, unsure what to do with them. They still think I'm the failure. They have no idea what I've carried alone. The years of bills, the therapy, the isolation, the way I sent anonymous payments to keep the house lights on when Dad's back surgery knocked him off his feet. Not that they ever asked where the money came from. Callista had her version of the story, that I left because I couldn't stand real family values, That I didn't come home for birthdays or funerals or the time the dog died because I was too selfish, too ambitious, too whatever made her feel better. I stood straighter. No, not this time. I wouldn't plead. I wouldn't explain. I'd show them, not with words, but with receipts. I met Melis's gaze again. She tilted her head slightly, almost like she wanted to say something, but instead disappeared into the kitchen. The living room buzzed behind me. Someone turned the music up. I took a breath. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone, not to call a friend, not to vent. I scrolled to a familiar contact, one I hadn't used in months, one tied to account numbers, document folders, and paper trails they thought were invisible. I tapped the number. As it rang, I stepped outside, the door closing behind me like a soft slap. This call wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't be messy, but it would be the first ripple, the first undoing of the story they built around my absence. I looked up at the sky, gray, heavy with snow. Then the voice on the other end answered. "Miss Morrison, how can I assist you today?" I smiled. For the first time in 3 years. The sound of my own voice surprised me. It wasn't shaky. It was sharp, precise, the kind that means business. I ended the call before the rep could even offer to confirm anything. Just hearing my full name repeated back to me like it belonged somewhere, like it meant something, was enough for now. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket, took a long breath, and went back inside. The air in the house had that dry, over-scented stillness again. Too much cinnamon, too much tension. Laughter floated in from the dining room, like none of what happened had landed, like my existence was background noise they'd already muted. I walked past the gifts still sitting untouched on the entryway table. No one had moved them. They sat there like misplaced packages, like something delivered to the wrong address. Maybe that was the message. In the dining room, the table was set with precision. White tablecloth, gold-trimmed china, cloth napkins folded into triangles. It looked like something from a holiday catalog, except for one glaring thing. There were 7 chairs, and 8 people. For a second I stood there, wondering if I'd miscounted. But no, 7 chairs, one for everyone but me. "You can grab the folding chair from the garage," Callista said, without even looking up from her seat at the head of the table. Her voice was syrupy, casual, as if this were a normal suggestion. Dad, Raymond, added without turning his head, "That old one still holds." The clatter of silverware and conversation carried on. No one acknowledged the insult, not directly, not verbally, but it hung in the air like smoke from a forgotten fire. I walked out to the garage. The light was dim, flickering. The cold seeped through my sleeves. I spotted the chair tucked between 2 dusty crates, an old metal folding chair, rust on the hinges, one leg slightly bent inward. I pulled it out, brushing off cobwebs with the back of my glove. As I walked it back inside, the metal legs clanged slightly against the hardwood floor. It was louder than it should have been. No one looked up. I placed it at the end of the table. No one moved to make room. No one scooted over, so I positioned it half off to the side, where I could still hear the conversation but not be part of it. The seat was lower than the rest. My chin was level with the lip of the table. I sat down quietly. Dinner began. Dishes passed around like clockwork, roast ham, scalloped potatoes, green beans with too much butter. But the platters skipped me, unless I reached out for them myself. I served myself last. No one noticed, or maybe they did, and pretended not to. From this angle, everyone looked just a little taller than me. That chair wasn't just old, it was my role here. A piece kept only out of obligation, convenient when needed, forgettable when not. Callista was in her element, holding court, discussing PTA bake sales and brand deals with equal authority. Her daughter, Poppy, chimed in with exaggerated teenage sarcasm every few minutes. Raymond sat quietly at one end, nodding when spoken to, chewing slowly. Melis, across from me, caught my eye once or twice, offering something softer, but she didn't speak up. After the meal, I stood to help clear the table, but Callista waved a hand. "We've got it, Teagan. You just relax." The way she said relax felt like a slap. So I sat back down, watching as the others stood, carried dishes into the kitchen, laughing about something I couldn't hear. I waited. When the kitchen emptied out and the table was cleared, I stood, walked to the entryway, and returned with the gift bag I'd prepared. Before we move on to dessert, I said, forcing calm into my voice, I brought something for everyone. Callista turned, arching an eyebrow. Oh? I handed Raymond a leather-bound journal, classic, understated. He looked at it, then at me. Didn't ask for anything, he said flatly, placing it on the corner of the table like junk mail. Next, I turned to Callista and gave her a small skincare set, thoughtfully chosen, high-end. She opened it, glanced inside, then looked back at me with that tight-lipped smile she'd perfected since middle school. Skincare? She said slowly. Are you trying to say something? She didn't wait for an answer. She turned, walked into the kitchen, and I heard the unmistakable thunk of the trash lid opening and closing. My stomach clenched, but my face stayed calm. I handed Malis a slim envelope. Just a small gift card, I said. For books or whatever you might need next semester. She took it gently, smiled quickly, then tucked it into her hoodie pocket, without saying anything more than a quiet, thanks. Callista returned, wiping her hands on a dish towel like nothing had happened. Well, that was thoughtful, she said to the room, her voice tinged with sarcasm so light you'd miss it if you didn't grow up knowing exactly how she weaponized politeness. I stood still for a moment. My hands had started to tremble, not visibly, not yet, but I could feel it in my wrists. They didn't just reject the gifts, I thought. They rejected the thought behind them. The laughter started again, something about an ornament mishap. I wasn't part of the story. I wasn't even in the room, really. I excused myself. In the hallway, I passed by the entry table again. The ribbon on the last gift had slipped off. I didn't fix it. The bathroom was cool and smelled like peppermint soap. I locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and stared at myself in the mirror. You came here thinking success would change their eyes. It didn't. The woman staring back at me wasn't someone who needed approval. She was someone who had forgotten how little it was ever offered. I stood up, splashed cold water on my face, and dried off with one of those embroidered guest towels Callista insisted on for presentation. This house never left room for someone like me to be whole, but I wasn't just here to be seen. I came to show them what they'd chosen to forget, and I wasn't done yet. The basement door creaked as I stepped down, not to hide, but to remember what they'd buried. I told them I needed some air, maybe stretch my legs. Nobody objected. No one even asked where I was going. The hallway was empty, and so was their interest. It was early evening now. The sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving long blue shadows crawling across the floors of that old house. I slipped out the side door and took a slow breath on the porch. Cold, sharp, but it helped. The mountain air always had a way of making lies feel smaller, and I was ready to find some truth. The garage was still the same. Unfinished walls, exposed insulation. The floor was stained with motor oil and old regrets. I flipped the light switch and heard the faint buzz of the flickering overhead bulb, still working somehow. My boots tapped softly as I moved past dusty exercise equipment no one had used in years, then over to the shelf near the water heater where Mom used to keep holiday decorations. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, taped carelessly, labeled with fading Sharpie. I scanned them slowly. XMS lights, tools, Dad, camping stuff, Miss C. Then I saw it. A smaller plastic container, cracked on one corner, barely hanging on. The label read, Miss T. Just the letter, no full name, not Teagan, just T, like even writing my name was too much. I pulled the box down gently, setting it on top of an old cooler. When I opened the lid, dust danced in the light. I coughed once, waved it away, then started going through what had been left of me. There was a third-grade drawing of a dog I never owned, a spelling bee ribbon from middle school, a faded birthday card, 5th grade, I think. The handwriting was Mom's. I traced her cursive with my finger, rereading the words until my throat tightened. Beneath the card, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small velvet pouch. I didn't recognize it at first. The pouch was gray now, its original color long gone, but when I opened it, I stopped breathing. Inside was a delicate silver chain, simple, worn, with a small dove charm at the center. My mother had given it to me the day I left for college. She pulled me aside while Callista was busy flirting with one of her boyfriend's older brothers and whispered, "This is for you, to remind you, you can fly wherever you need to, and you always have a place to land." I wore it every day freshman year, then less often, then not at all. But I never gave it away. I never forgot it, and yet, here it was, buried in a plastic box in a garage corner like an old pair of skates. It wasn't just forgotten, it was discarded. I gripped the chain tighter than I should have, fingers trembling. The charm dug into my palm, but I didn't let go. How do you respond to a message like that? To the reality that a memory you cherished was treated like trash? I closed the pouch, set it in my coat pocket, and stood still for a long moment, surrounded by cobwebs, dust, and boxes of a family I didn't fit into anymore. I walked back inside through the side entrance. The lights were warmer, the voices louder, Callista's laughter ringing out like a TV sitcom laugh track. Instead of returning to the living room, I headed toward the back of the house. My old room. I hadn't stepped foot in it since Mom's funeral. The door was cracked open. I pushed it gently. Whatever memories I expected to find were gone. My room had become a studio, a literal influencer setup. Ring light, tripods, a vanity mirror covered in sticky notes with hashtags like #lightwithin and #blessedlife. Boxes of PR skincare stacked along one wall. The smell of face cream and artificial vanilla choked the air. And there were no posters on the walls, no old bookshelf, no familiar quilt, nothing that suggested a girl had grown up in here. The closet door hung open. I walked to it, slowly. Inside, along the bottom, was a black trash bag, half open. I crouched down and peeked inside. My journals. All of them. Stacked like garbage, pages folded, some torn. Years of my handwriting. My thoughts, my hopes, my therapy assignments, my prayers, dumped like leftovers from someone else's life. Even the walls forgot me. I stood slowly, walked back into the hallway, and sat down on the carpet just outside the door. The bracelet was still in my coat pocket. I pulled it out again, holding it flat in my palm. Memories of Mom flooded in. Her voice, her touch, the way she never raised her voice but could shut down a room with a single look. How she always defended me without making a show of it. When I'd get snide comments from Callista or cold shoulders from Dad, Mom would slide me an extra dessert or whisper, "Don't worry, you're seen." I remembered once, in high school, after a brutal night at the dinner table where Callista tore into me about my clothes, my music, my everything. Mom tucked me in and said softly, "If they don't see you, it's because they can't see that far." She didn't mean I was invisible. She meant I was ahead. I looked at the bracelet again, the tiny dove resting in my hand. "But I see me now," I whispered. "And I'm not leaving as a ghost." I stood up, brushed the dust off my jeans, slid the bracelet around my wrist and clasped it tightly. Whatever came next, I wasn't just a background character anymore. I was here, fully, finally. That bracelet was buried, just like the truth. But now, both were back in my hands. I didn't just want my place at the table, I wanted my story back. By the time morning crept in, the fire in me hadn't cooled. I'd slept maybe 2 hours, mostly just sat upright in bed staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above me. Everything in this house spun like that, slow, constant, quiet, until it wasn't. I waited until I could hear movement downstairs, silverware clinking, someone moving the kettle. Then I headed for the kitchen. The house smelled like burnt toast and cinnamon again. My steps were careful, controlled. I didn't want another showdown, not yet. I just wanted coffee, maybe a minute to feel normal in a place that had erased me inch by inch. I walked in and reached for the mug rack without looking around too much. That's when I saw it. Mounted on the wall near the pantry, polished brass, centered perfectly like it belonged there. Kitchen lovingly renovated by Callista Morrison. 2023. I stopped mid-reach. My hand hovered in the air like it didn't know what to do anymore. The plaque shone against the morning light, smug and golden and final. I blinked. Then again, maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was temporary. But no, there were screws. Someone had taken the time to make this permanent. That kitchen? I paid for it. Quietly. After Mom passed, I'd sent the funds anonymously through the local contractor she'd trusted. The only person who knew was me and the firm that cleared the payment. I didn't ask for credit, but I didn't expect theft either. Of course, they'd carve her name into what I built. I didn't say anything. I poured my coffee, hands colder than they should have been. I turned and saw Raymond standing near the fridge, dressed in one of his usual faded polos and worn-in jeans. He looked at me, then at the plaque, then back at me. "Didn't know you were up," he said, casual, like we were roommates. "I saw the plaque," I said, keeping my tone level. He shrugged. "She coordinated the work. Got it done fast, too." I sipped the coffee slowly. Then I set it down, gently. "Do you remember when you had that spinal surgery 2 years ago? The hospital stay after?" He gave me a long look. "Yeah, why? Do you remember who paid that bill?" He squinted, like I'd asked him to solve a math problem. "Insurance covered it." I shook my head. "No, it didn't. You maxed out your plan. I paid the remaining balance. Directly." He waved a hand. "I didn't need you to do that." "I have the invoice," I replied. "Digitally signed by you. You needed help. I helped." His jaw tensed. "I never saw any invoice. If you're saying you gave money, fine, but I never asked for it. You think waving that around earns you some trophy?" I pulled my phone from my back pocket, opened my document folder, and tapped twice. There, the signature. His. Scanned through the hospital's system, sent to my email with confirmation from the billing department. I held the phone out, showing him. Raymond stared at it, then looked back at me. "You forged that," he said. It wasn't even a question, just a declaration. My hand dropped to my side, the phone still glowing. My breath caught, not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. "I didn't forge anything," I said softly. "You just don't want to admit someone saved you." He didn't reply, just turned and opened the fridge. I walked out. I couldn't stay in that room another second. In the hallway, I ran into Mayless, arms full of laundry, her eyes wide like she'd heard enough to piece it all together. She set the laundry basket down and reached into her hoodie pocket. "Here," she said, voice low. "I found this when I was organizing the books in the den. They were going to toss it." It was a photo, one of those glossy holiday prints you order online, Christmas last year. All the usual suspects were in it. Raymond, Callista, her daughter, the neighbors, even one of her old boyfriends smiling with a glass of wine in hand. But I wasn't there. Except I had been. I remembered that night clearly. I wore a green dress I hated. I stood next to Dad in the lineup. The photographer had to take 3 photos because Raymond kept blinking. But in this version, I was gone. Cropped out, edited, deleted. On the back, someone had written, "Our full family, 2023. My hands tightened around the edge of the photo. I was airbrushed out, just like the truth. "Thanks," I murmured, slipping it into my coat. Mayless didn't say anything else. She just picked up the laundry again and disappeared upstairs. I walked outside to the driveway. The cold helped. I sat in the car with the engine off, staring at the house through the windshield. The living room glowed warmly from within. From the outside, you'd never guess a storm was brewing inside. I thought of Mom. How she used to let me help stir the gravy even when I got lumps in it. How she used to leave Post-it notes in my lunchbox with messages like, "Don't let the world tell you who you are." And now here I was, fighting to prove I existed. Fighting not for revenge, but to be remembered. I pulled the photo from my coat, looked at it again, then tucked it into the glove box. They erased me from pictures. Tomorrow, I'd erase their silence. The envelope was thin, but what it held weighed more than every empty seat at that table. I kept it in my hand as I sat at the edge of the guest bed, The door gently closed behind me. The hall had gone quiet. Somewhere, someone was running water, maybe brushing their teeth, maybe pretending that earlier hadn't happened. But the house had stilled the way it always did when no one wanted to speak truth aloud. Malis hadn't said much when she handed it to me, just placed the envelope in my hand with eyes that looked older than 22. "It was in the attic," she'd whispered, barely above a breath. "I don't think you were ever meant to leave without reading it." Then she slipped away, soft-footed down the hallway, her hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, like she didn't want to be seen holding anything that belonged to me. I stared at the envelope for a long time before I opened it. There was no name on the front, no date, just worn edges and yellowing paper that told me it had been sitting for longer than anyone cared to admit. I held my breath as I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the pages inside. It was her handwriting. Immediately. Unmistakable. Not the careful penmanship she used on Christmas cards, but her real script, the one I knew from lunchbox notes and margin scribbles in cookbooks. "Teagan, if you're holding this, it means you came back, and that you're probably still being misunderstood. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I know this house better than anyone. I know how easy it is for people here to erase things that make them uncomfortable." I paused, let my eyes adjust, my chest settle. Then I kept reading. "I saw more in you than they could handle, Teagan. That's why they silenced you. You were never too much. They were just too small." The breath caught in my throat. "You stood up when they looked away. You told the truth when silence was easier. You left, not because you didn't love us, but because staying would have killed the part of you I admired most." I wiped my cheek with the back of my hand, angry that it was wet. "Callista will never admit it, but she feared your strength. Your independence made her feel exposed. And your father, well, he grew up in a world where love was control. He called it order. I tried to balance that for as long as I could, but my time ran short." I pressed the paper to my chest, then unfolded the second sheet. Attached with it was a photocopy, faded but legible, of a handwritten codicil, signed and dated. My mother's signature, along with a note scribbled at the bottom. "In the event of my passing, the property at 17 Oakview Lane is to be transferred to Teagan Morrison, who has provided ongoing support emotionally and financially for this home." The words looked like they'd been written in a rush. The ink ran in places. No lawyer's stamp, no notary. But it was real, and it was meant for me. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I laughed, once, soft, short, not from amusement, from disbelief. So I wasn't crazy, I wasn't dramatic, I wasn't imagining the weight I'd carried alone. She saw me, Mom saw all of it, even the things I never said out loud. She knew the truth, and she'd written it down because she didn't trust the rest of them to carry it forward. It wasn't a will, but it was enough. Enough for me. I folded the letter carefully, like it was sacred, and placed it in the same purse where I'd kept her bracelet since I found it. Together. That felt right. The house groaned softly above me, an old pipe settling, or the floor shifting beneath someone's step. I listened to it like it might give me another message. I stood and looked around the room, generic now, stripped of meaning. Not mine, not Callista's, just another blank space in a house full of performance. I wasn't interested in reclaiming walls or memories anymore. This wasn't about taking back what they stole. It was about honoring what she gave, because she didn't just give me the house. She gave me the truth they buried, the truth they painted over with smiles and plaques and empty seats. I walked back to the window and looked out across the yard. The Christmas lights blinked steadily along the porch roof. It would snow soon, maybe even tonight. The quiet kind of snow that muffles everything and makes the world look softer than it really is. But not even snow could hide what I had now. Clarity. Resolve. I whispered, almost like she could still hear me. "Thank you, Mom, for not leaving me invisible." Then I turned off the light, closed the purse around the letter and bracelet, and sat on the bed with my back straight and my feet grounded. If they thought silence was power, they hadn't heard the truth roar yet. The next morning, I didn't wait for them to come to me. I called the bank first. The sun hadn't fully cleared the trees behind the house when I padded down to the dining room in my socks, coffee already in hand. My coat, still draped over the back of the chair from the night before, held the letter. The bracelet was on my wrist. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet where every tick of the thermostat, every creak in the floorboard sounds suspicious. But I liked it that way. I sat at the head of the table, not because it was my seat, but because it was usually Callista's. I tapped the speaker button and held the phone up. "Hi, this is Teagan Morrison. I'd like to cancel all automatic transfers, effective immediately. That includes rent payments to Morrison Property Management, utility support to the Oakview Lane address, grocery stipends, and any active medical reimbursements under Raymond Morrison's name." The woman on the other end confirmed each item, her voice as neutral and professional as mine. I thanked her, hung up, and took a sip of coffee. That's when I noticed movement near the kitchen. Callista stood half in, half out of the doorway, barefoot, lip gloss already on. Arms crossed tight like she was hugging herself in disbelief. "You're canceling the rent?" she asked, voice thin. "I am. Everything? Every penny." Her lips parted, but nothing came out at first. Then she blinked hard. "You're cutting us off?" "You don't get to erase me," I said calmly, "and still cash me." She stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. I could practically hear the spin forming behind her eyes. How she'd retell this, how I'd blindsided them, how I was heartless. She turned and disappeared down the hallway. I heard the familiar pound of footsteps up the stairs, and then, minutes later, the thud of Raymond's boots on the way down. He stormed in, jaw clenched, eyes blazing like this was his battlefield, and I was the enemy. "You ungrateful brat," he growled. "You walk in here waving your checkbook like it earns you love." "I didn't walk in waving anything," I said, standing slowly. "But I did walk in with proof. You are not my daughter. You never were." The words hit like ice water. Not unexpected, but still sharp. I paused, let them hang for a second. Then I said, "No, I was your lifeline. You just didn't know it." He flinched, not with fear, but like I'd poked something tender, something he didn't want to admit was even there. The room stilled. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the top of the stairs, Callista called down with that same theatrical indignation she'd always perfected. "This is what you do when your career collapses? You crawl back for attention?" I looked up at her. Funny. From where I stand, I'm the only one who didn't need to move back in. She walked down a few steps, gripping the railing. "We took you in. And this is how you repay us?" "I've been paying for 3 years," I said, my voice still level. "Now, you're getting the invoice." Raymond grabbed the back of a dining chair, knuckles white. "You don't get to come in here and play victim." "I'm not playing anything. I'm done pretending this house didn't stand on my shoulders for 3 years, while you all smiled for Facebook photos and forgot who kept the fridge full." His face reddened. "That was your choice." "No, that was Mom's dying wish. She asked me to look after this place, not to feed your pride." The room held nothing now, no comfort, no holiday warmth, just 3 people, tangled in a web of lies, finally exposed to light. I stepped away from the table, grabbed my phone, and walked toward the hallway. Callista was still halfway down the stairs. "So what now, Teagan? You gonna sue us?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet, but I am calling my lawyer." Their silence followed me as I walked into my room. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed. The ringtone was a soft rhythm against my heart still pounding from everything that had just transpired. When the assistant picked up, I said clearly, "Hi, this is Teagan Morrison. I'm ready to move forward with the property claim. I'll email the scanned letter and supporting documents within the hour." I paused, then added, "Yes, I understand this won't be easy. I'm prepared." After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. My reflection in the mirror across the room looked different. Not angry, not shaken, resolved. They never saw me as family, only as funding. But I'm not their bank. I'm done being the silence they live in. They could twist the truth all they wanted. They could call it betrayal, spin it like drama. But I had proof. I had paperwork. I had a voice. And if blood didn't earn me a seat, maybe the law would. I knew what I had to do, and this time, I wasn't doing it quietly. After the call with my lawyer wrapped and I'd double-checked every document twice, I reached for the small black USB tucked in the inner pocket of my laptop sleeve. I'd labeled it Documents years ago, neutral, forgettable, but inside, it held everything they thought I'd left behind. The morning light filtered weakly through the guest room blinds as I plugged the drive into my laptop and waited for the folder to load. The fan on the laptop whirred to life as the contents populated. Scanned invoices, emails, saved voicemails, and screenshots. Years of proof. I hadn't intended to collect it all for this moment, but life has a funny way of preparing you long before you know you'll need it. I opened a folder titled Household Expenses and saw them all: utility payments to Duke Energy in Raymond's name, digital receipts from grocery deliveries I'd scheduled every month to this address, and medical reimbursement letters for prescription refills I never took myself. But the real hit came when I opened the folder labeled Unfiled Submissions. It only had one document, a PDF. The file name was Social Aid Form Callistum.pdf. I clicked it. My chest went still. There it was, an application to a government caregiver assistance program, dated 16 months ago. In the box labeled Proof of Income, she'd attached a payslip. My payslip. From my old firm in Chicago, the address listed, this house, the dependent, Raymond Morrison, the caregiver listed as recipient of funds, Callista Morrison. I scrolled slowly, my hand tightening on the mouse. She'd used my earnings to qualify herself as his primary caregiver, claiming she'd sacrificed her own employment to care for our father full-time, while I had been quietly footing the bills from 800 miles away. She took my paycheck to prove she was the caregiver, while I was the one paying for their lives. I whispered aloud, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. The folder icon blinked at me. I renamed the file, Callista Our Benefit Fraud.pdf. The silence around me felt dense, heavy, but underneath it, something inside me had shifted. No more hoping they'd correct the record, no more praying for decency. If she wanted an audience, she was going to get one. But this time, I was the narrator. Later that afternoon, I was curled up on the couch near the window when Malis returned from a coffee run. She set a cardboard cup on the table without saying a word and handed me her phone. "I thought you should see this," she murmured. It was a video. The title read, Martha Morrison Memorial, 2023 Tribute. I tapped play. My mother's face filled the screen, smiling in that familiar way that made your shoulders relax just by looking at her. Then came the slideshow, her with Raymond on their wedding day, her holding Callista as a baby, her with Callista's daughter, their family vacations. Every frame included everyone. Everyone except me. Even the group photos I remembered, ones where I knew I stood on the far right or left, had been cropped to exclude me. I watched the whole thing, not a single frame of me. "She didn't just erase me in private," I said, handing the phone back to Malis. "She deleted me publicly." Malis nodded once, like she didn't have the right words to offer, and maybe there weren't any. Before dinner, a neighbor I barely remembered stopped by. Middle-aged, polite, clutching a plastic-wrapped pie. He greeted Raymond, gave Callista a long-winded compliment on the beautiful tribute video, then turned to me. "I remember when you two were little," he said with a smile. "Callista told me about that scholarship deal. The one meant for her, but you ended up getting?" My spine stiffened. "I'm sorry," I said. "What did she say?" "Oh, just that there was a mix-up. Some kind of clerical thing. She never made a fuss about it. Said she didn't want to stir trouble. Classy of her, really." I smiled tightly. "Sure." He left, pie in hand, clueless. Inside, I walked to my room like I'd been pushed by wind. The scholarship. She was still using that lie? After all these years? The truth was simple. The scholarship was merit-based, not financial. I earned it. Our mother had even helped fill out the forms. Callista hadn't met the GPA requirements, but when I got the award letter, she called me a thief, said I'd stolen it right out from under her nose. She told everyone she let it go. She hadn't. She'd just waited until no one could check the facts anymore. "She's not just a liar," I murmured. "She's been preparing this stage for years. I was just late to the show." I opened my laptop again, created a folder called Truth, and began uploading. Utilities paid by Teagan.pdf. Medical financed by Teagan PDF. Callista benefit fraud PDF. Then I opened a blank Word doc and titled it, Addendum, Financial Contributions by Teagan Morrison, 2019 to 2023. I typed, in the absence of formal recognition or verbal acknowledgement, let this document serve as record of the financial and emotional labor contributed by Teagan Morrison toward the maintenance, stability, and survival of the Morrison household, specifically during and after the declining health of Martha Morrison. When I finished, I stared at the screen. It wasn't vengeance, it was clarity. I'd spent years pretending it didn't matter that I was erased, that I could survive without being seen. But it did matter. It mattered that my name was never spoken at the memorial, that no one had seen my mother's bracelet in the junk pile, that a government agency believed Callista was the angel of this family while I was dismissed as a distant child too selfish to come home. If they wanted stories, I'd give them records. If they wanted silence, they should have left me in peace. But they didn't. They invited the truth by continuing the lie. And the truth had teeth. And tomorrow, it would bite. They sat at the table smiling, clueless that I'd already pulled the rug. Christmas Day arrived with a forced cheeriness that clung to the house like fake snow on a window pane. Callista, in full performance mode, had organized a holiday brunch. She sent out a group text the night before, complete with snowflake emojis and a schedule, mimosas at 10, food by 11, casual gift exchange at noon. She was already dressed when I walked into the kitchen, draped in white wool and gold hoop earrings, flipping a frittata like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't say much, just nodded, made a small plate of fruit, and went about my morning. I wore black. Not because I was mourning, but because I wanted them to see me without distraction, without decoration, just as I was. Melis gave me a small nod from across the room. She hadn't said anything since last night's upload. She didn't need to. By noon, the table was set, laughter was flowing, and everyone was pretending things were normal. Callista was holding court again, talking about some new brand collaboration she was considering. Scented candles or protein powders. I stopped listening. Raymond sat at the head of the table. He hadn't said much to me since our exchange yesterday. His plate was full. His silence, fuller. I waited until the coffee cups were half empty and Callista's stories started to repeat. Then I stood. Mind if I share something? I asked, calm and measured. Everyone paused. Callista froze mid-sip. Raymond glanced up but didn't say a word. I've put together a short video, I said. A little something for the holiday. It won't take long. Before they could respond, I connected my laptop to the flat screen mounted on the wall, same one Callista had used for the memorial video that had conveniently excluded me. The screen lit up. First, a date, December 17th, 2018. Then, my mother's face appeared, pale but smiling. She was sitting in the old armchair, a scarf around her head, voice soft but unwavering. Teagan, she began, this house belongs to you. Your father and I agreed. He's signing today. The camera panned to a close-up of Raymond holding a pen, signing a document on the kitchen table, the same kitchen they now sat in. The video zoomed in on the signature, date-stamped and clear. No one spoke, not even Callista. I closed the laptop. Silence draped over the table like a fresh tablecloth no one wanted to wrinkle. That's fake, Callista said, her voice cracking just enough to betray her confidence. That video doesn't count. It's not legal. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 thick envelopes. The first I handed to Raymond. Notice of eviction, I said. The property transfer is now officially executed under state law. You have 30 days. His face went blank, not angry, just empty. The second I gave to Callista. Cease and desist for benefit fraud, I said, just as even. Your application to the caregiver program was submitted using false documentation. I've reported it. Callista stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. You think you can just, what, take everything? You called me a parasite, I replied, voice steady. But I was the foundation. And now, you're out. Her face flushed, then drained. She opened her mouth again, but the words didn't come. Raymond stood, but didn't speak. I just picked up the envelope and walked out of the room, heading straight for the back door without even finishing his coffee. The brunch ended without dessert. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch with Malis. She hadn't said much during the confrontation, but now she gently reached over and took my hand under the blanket we shared. The wind had picked up. Snow was starting to fall, soft and slow. I didn't want revenge, I said softly, watching a flake melt on my glove. I wanted the truth to speak. Malis squeezed my fingers, and it screamed. Inside, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that didn't come from peace, but from truth, landing like a thunderclap. The neighbors who had stopped by earlier with casseroles and cards were now whispering. I saw Mrs. Wilkins glance at Callista's car and then look away quickly. Mr. Lanning, who used to mow the lawn for free when Mom got sick, had said hello to me earlier, but had walked past Callista like she wasn't there. Public image mattered in this neighborhood, and Callista's had just cracked like a dropped ornament. I stood and walked back inside, leaving my coat on the hook. In the hallway, I paused to look at the plaque Callista had screwed into the wall last year. Kitchen lovingly renovated by Callista Morrison, 2023. I pulled it off, took it upstairs, and dropped it in the trash. No anger, just clarity. They thought I was leaving empty-handed. What they saw was me taking back everything without raising my voice. The house was quiet now, but it finally echoed with something true. 4 days had passed since Christmas brunch unraveled into the reckoning I never planned, but always knew was coming. Callista and Raymond had packed up by the morning of the 27th. No grand exit, no shouting match. Just the scrape of suitcase wheels on hardwood and the faint sound of a trunk closing. When I came downstairs that day, the living room had already been stripped of their presence. Her ring light was gone. His recliner sat abandoned, a small tear in the armrest the only evidence of his years there. A letter sat on the kitchen counter. I hadn't touched it. White envelope. My name scrawled in Raymond's unmistakable block handwriting. No stamp, no return address. Just wait. I didn't open it. It wasn't time. The house belonged to silence now, but not the kind that punishes or accuses. The kind that cleanses. I spent the next morning walking room to room, taking inventory, not of furniture or paint colors, but of possibility. The hallway where Callista hung her influencer plaque now held nothing but an outline in dust. The space looked brighter without it. I stood there with a small cup of black coffee, the quiet helping me think more clearly than I had in months. That afternoon, I met with Nancy, a local architect Malis had introduced me to at the community center downtown. We sat in the now empty dining room, blueprints rolled out between us. I want to keep this table, I told her, but everything else we can shift. Nancy smiled. That table's the anchor, she said. Makes sense. We sketched the main floor into a flexible workshop space, somewhere women could gather to learn, to relearn, to rebuild. The front room would be a resource hub, computers, job boards, financial literacy materials. The sunroom, once my mother's favorite place, would be a quiet space for counseling, or just resting without being judged. We'd call it the Dove House, for my mother, for the bracelet I still wore, for every woman who needed a safe landing. No folding chairs, I told Nancy. No plastic ones, no hierarchy. 8 equal chairs? She asked. I nodded. Exactly. By New Year's Eve, the house looked different, not because it had changed yet, but because the energy had shifted. The shame, the pettiness, the false peace, they'd all been scrubbed away. Malis moved in that weekend. She carried in just a few boxes, books, sweaters, a little cactus she'd named after a college professor she didn't like. She settled in quickly, quietly. One morning she placed her hand on the doorknob to the old guest room, paused and said, I think I'll sleep in your old room. It feels more like home. I just smiled and nodded. She volunteered to help with the nonprofit's rollout. We split tasks, swapped ideas, painted over every last trace of curated perfection Callista had left behind. On the newly bare wall in the hallway, we hung a single frame, an old photo of me, my mother, and a younger Malus, sitting on the porch with lemonade in hand, all three of us laughing about something no one remembered. "You're not invisible," Malus said as she tapped the frame to straighten it. "You're the blueprint." I didn't cry, but I felt it. Across town, the story had already started shifting. Callista's social media was eerily quiet. Her last video had less than 100 views, and the comments were filled with questions she wouldn't answer. The fraud report I'd filed had quietly begun to make its way through the right channels. Nothing loud, nothing tabloid-worthy, just steady consequences moving through the system like they were supposed to. Raymond had moved in with an old army buddy down in Charleston. No one knew more than that. The house phone rang twice that week, and both times I let it go to voicemail. No new messages, except for the letter on the counter. Still unopened. I'd read it eventually, but on my terms, not his. One night, after Malus had gone to bed, I stood in the dining room alone. The lights dimmed, the heat whispering through the vents. The table was bare except for a single candle I'd lit more for warmth than ambiance. I stood where my folding chair used to be, the one they made me drag out of the garage that first night. I remembered how low it sat, how the legs wobbled, how my voice felt smaller when I spoke from it. But that chair was gone now. In its place was a solid, matching chair, same height, same design, same space at the table as everyone else. This chair is mine now, not because I earned it, but because I stopped asking for permission to belong. Some ghosts get to rest. Some get to rebuild. I got to do both. And in doing so, I finally understood. I don't write checks in silence anymore. I don't beg for seats. When I sit, it's because I built the damn table. Sometimes the people who should have protected you are the ones who tried hardest to erase you. But silence doesn't mean weakness, and walking away doesn't mean surrender. If this story resonated with something you've been through, tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to choose yourself over your family? Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that hit home. Your voice matters, and you're not alone.